Thank you. About Cannabis Public School, our mission is to ensure that everyone across America has accurate information about the holistic benefits and potential risks of cannabis. We are dedicated to creating a culture of continuous learning and advocacy, empowering the public to lead the way in transforming healthcare. Our goal is to make well-researched, non-pharmacological treatments, easily accessible to healthcare consumers, promote healthcare autonomy, and create lifestyles that enhance the body's intelligence to thrive and heal. Okay, so in honor of introducing my assistant, Chelsea, I'm going to try to tell this New York story that my sister told me years ago. So, do you happen to know this story?
I guess we'll find out, right?
So my sister, and did you live in the same building with them?
Down the street, yeah, okay. But more or less, same neighborhood.
So my sister
It's a bit hard to hear though with the music.
Yeah, Mo, do you want to turn down that music?
Oh, I didn't know you could hear the dang music. Okay, let me see.
That's a nice shot.
Yeah, that's Chelsea. Sorry for the
technical difficulties.
Technical, always.
Mo, do you want to try to do this after? We can come back to this at the end. If you want to just close out of the screen since it's there you go. Oh, now you're on. Hold on, you're muted. I muted you to try to get the music to stop playing, but that didn't work. Hold on. Can you unmute yourself, Mo? You're still muted. Mo. You're still on mute, Mo.
Oh, nice.
There we go. Okay. So yeah, go ahead.
Oh, good Lord.
I tried to mute you to rid us of the jingle there, but it was unsuccessful. So
our New York story. Okay, so the Arabic kid was at the ice cream truck, and the ice cream seller was also Arabic, and so the Arabic kid was saying, you know, chipwich, is it kosher? Creamsicle, is it kosher? Strawberry shortcake, is it kosher? King cone, is it kosher? And so finally the ice cream seller says, why are you asking if everything is kosher? You're not even Jewish. And he says, it's for my friend. And then the little Jewish kid comes from behind his shadow. And that's the New York story. So anyway, I knew I was going to butcher it. I'm horrible at telling stories. But that was the dad joke. And it ties into my assistant, Chelsea, who I'm introducing you all to. Every now and then you'll probably get a letter from Chelsea or some sort of promotion from Chelsea, or you hear about Chelsea, but from my sister Chelsea, who considers you the daughter she never had. She's always like giving me updates. Chelsea this, Chelsea that, Chelsea, and I didn't know you, so I was just like, oh, hey. okay. And so finally she said once, and Chelsea's such a great writer. And I was like, oh wait, she's a great writer? Can she help me at Cannabis Public School? And that's how we got Chelsea to be my amazing assistant at Cannabis Public School. So I appreciate all the work you've done so far. And Chelsea, why don't you go ahead and say hi?
Alrighty, well, I'll keep this short and sweet because I know what we're all here for. My name is Chelsea. I am in sunny San Diego, California, though it is June 1st, so we are approaching June gloom. So we'll see how much sun we get. But yeah, I'm excited to be working with Mo, and like you said, you'll probably be seeing my name here and there in an email. Please reach out to me as well if you have any questions. But I think without further ado, we should probably get on to our speaker.
Wait a minute. No, you're going to talk about the upcoming speakers.
Yep, exactly. So we do have some fun and exciting things coming up. On the 8th, we have a lecture on tolerance with Dr. Kaplan. On the 15th, we will be closed for Father's Day. So you guys.
And Juneteenth.
And Juneteenth is that same week too, so we will be closed that Sunday. We have the Cancer Playbook with Jim Gurnscher. I think I was going to say I'll have to double check and ask him how to pronounce that. That'll be on 6/22. And then finally, we're going to wrap up the month with the Meeting in the Spirit of Cannabis, a Cannasol collection with Michelle Dinson on the 29th. So we'll get that flyer sent out to you guys and hit us up if you have any more questions.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Appreciate you so much. Lex Pelger's talk is about the use of cannabinoids against the major neurodegenerative diseases. He'll share the background of the clinical work that's been done so far, the combination of cannabinoids most referenced in the literature, and the background on the biochemistry of the several mechanisms used by the cannabinoids to help protect the brain. Here are our learning goals. And Lex, sorry, I had to use that iconic picture of you there. I just couldn't pass it up. Very Jim Morrison-like. Lex Pelger is a biochemist by background, and in his newsletter, Cannabinoids and the People, which I have in the chat for you to subscribe to, has been sharing and annotating every single new piece of cannabinoid literature for more than 5 years now. He shares about the new science on YouTube, maintains a public archive for health practitioners and patients to learn about the best cannabinoids for their health. He's also writing a cannographic novel series based on Moby Dick and the intricacies of the endocannabinoid system, the long human history with cannabis. If you believe it evolved with us, you're singing my song, and the horrors of the wars on drugs. And so, Lex, here's where you take us down the rabbit hole. And thank you for being here and tolerating our technical difficulties, which I'm still having. Oh, I can't get out of here.
There, I'll take over. I think I can take over like that.
Amazing.
Everyone can see okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Perfect.
Great. Awesome. And great timing. The kids are just getting back from biking. So if you hear a lot of background noise, they are amped up today for some reason. So you might get some background noise. But that's fine. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. This is Neuro Cannabinoids for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and MS. And my background is in biochemistry, as you'll see. And this is a general order that I'll go through things today. It's kind of in the order of more evidence and more efficacy that you see out there in the world. Definitely help for Alzheimer's as well as Parkinson's, but multiple sclerosis, you really see a lot of life-changing stuff. Sorry, the 4-year-old's really hitting the wall. She's so upset. She found out that the Queen Elizabeth died today. And that sent her into a spiral for 20 minutes. Poor thing. It's that kind of mood. Anyway, and then I'll end on the cannabinoids to use. And so for each of these, I'll probably start with the biochemistry of why it's working, and then some of the evidence that we have for it. And by the way, don't worry about if you want this lecture or this slideshow, feel free to email me, pelger@gmail.com or lex@whitewhalecreations.com. It's easy to find me. And so you don't have to scribble down notes for everything. And also my newsletter is there, Cannabinoids and the People. That's a good way to stay on top of things. And then the public archive I maintain is at cvresearch.info. And I'm constantly updating that. So all of the evidence for these conditions are now updated on cvresearch.info. So you can go and see everything. I have it organized by clinical data, then the best review papers, then the charts that are around this disease. I like charts. And then ending with the preclinical literature so you get the background of how the biochemistry is working. And so to get into what really matters, here is the basics of how, in general, the endocannabinoid system works with neurodegeneration. And by the way, when I put this together, I kind of figured this was mostly going to be healthcare practitioners attending who know something about the endocannabinoid system. But feel free, I'll try to do the basics of definitions as we go, and feel free to just hit me up in the comments with any questions. And if I don't see the question, Mo, feel free to let me know if a good one came in. So here's our first good chart, because the endocannabinoid system isn't so tied up with the immune system and also with the brain. And so those together, it makes so much sense that you have all these different targets of the phytocannabinoids and why they're helping. And for one, they help the neurons. One of the main ways is the antioxidant properties and quenching free radicals. That's a big part of most of these diseases, and lowering the antioxidation happening is a big help. It also helps a lot with synaptic plasticity and usually helps the brain repair from things or slows down brain damage. And in fact, I think it's reasonable to say at this point that cannabinoids cause neurogenesis. They create new brain cells, which is funny because it wasn't even 20 years ago that there was a scientific consensus that new brain cells were formed in adult human. And now most of the field believes that happens, and the evidence is good that cannabinoids, along with things like the psychedelic drugs, actually help new brain cells to grow, especially in the hippocampus in the memory area. The other major place they're working is with the astrocytes, which are the most predominant brain support cells. They're not neurons, but they are widespread support cells shaped like stars, and they help to modulate neurotransmission in general, and they also help with balancing the neurotransmitters, and the cannabinoids are interacting with most of the major neurotransmitter systems as well. And then finally, the one that I see the most in the literature is the microglial cells, the guardian immune cells of the central nervous system. And so much of the time, especially with Parkinson's, but with all three of these diseases, when you see help happening and you study it in a preclinical model, you find out that it's the microglial cells that are actually doing the help. With what they do for the immune response, as well as protecting against aberrant protein aggregation like in Alzheimer's. So that's a little bit of how it works, and you can see some of the conditions by those. And then, so here's Alzheimer's disease, and here is a chart that I really liked that came out last year, and it is the different targets that CBD is using. And you see the CBD helps with oxidative stress. It also helps with those actual amyloid beta plaques that are the hallmark of the disease, as well as the tau proteins that get hyperphosphorylated. The cannabinoids and CBD specifically help to lower that. And also, another thing that CBD does, you see the PPAR receptors there. So the PPAR receptors, they're not as sexy as CB1 and CB2, but they are very important, and you see them a lot when you see why this works, because they are nuclear receptors that are on the nucleus, and they help to regulate genetic transcription. And so the ability of cannabinoids to alter the genetic transcription in a cell is, I think, a huge part of why they work, and an area that's not that well studied. We see that they work via the PPAR receptors. We often don't know which genes are being turned on. But I remember in one, this was, I think, a skin cell study, and there haven't been enough studies like this, but the presence of CBD turned on about 1,500 genes and turned off an equal or lower number. It was something like that. The number of genes involved is huge, let alone all the different places that CBD binds and interacts with. And so, of course, CBD also helps with neuroinflammation. It also helps to lower apoptosis, which is programmed cellular suicide, which is what the brain often does in these situations. When a neuron becomes too damaged, it causes it to commit suicide. Cannabinoids can help lower that and protect more of the brain that we have. It also helps with gliosis, which is the formation of scars in the fibrous networks of the brain. So I try not to go too much into biochemistry, even though that's what I like and that's what my books are about. I really find this part of the world fascinating, but we are here about how it's actually going to be helping. And so you see in animal models that so this is some of the effects that we know from studies on through the CB1 receptor and the CB2 receptor. And remind that the CB1 receptor is very widespread in our brains, and that's the one that mediates the psychoactive effects of THC. So if you get high, it's via the CB1 receptor. And people don't often know this, but of the class of receptors this is, the G protein coupled receptors. So not the more simple ion receptors that just let their stuff through, but these very complicated G protein coupled receptors that are very hard to figure out and took like 7 Nobel Prizes to figure out all the transmissions of, and are one of the half of all drugs are aimed at GPCR receptors. The most predominant GPCR receptor in the brain is CB1. And that is, to someone who studies the brain, it is shocking how widespread it is and how little talked about it is when you have it being the most widespread of this, widespread type of receptor that gets targeted by so many drugs. Then the CB2 receptor is basically on all the organs of your body and is very much tied up with the immune system. And so depending on the disease, sometimes it's a little bit more CB1 receptor seems to be causing a good effect, sometimes CB2, and then sometimes it's other neurotransmission systems. But you do see help in animals for spatial learning speed, various measures of anxiety. In humans, lots for irritability, restlessness, sleep disturbances, apathy, and improved cognitive impairments, emotional states. So you can feel free to read this chart more in depth, but there are a lot of ways to activate these receptors. We generally use THC and CBD because they're the easiest and they're most well studied, but the acids of these would also work there. And then we have a number of drugs too, of the synthetic cannabinoids that in the future, as we get to study them more, might also be used as well. But right now, basically CBD and THC are a great thing to give. I'll cover 4 papers here quickly. So this was 10 female patients with severe behavioral problems. And when they were given THC CBD medicine, they had improvements in their agitation and aggression scores of around 40%. For their rigidity and motor agitations, they saw a 50% increase. And their care staff reported that they were more calm, less irritable, more engaged, and even smiling more. So there were 2 women that actually had persistent screaming. It sounded like almost all the time they were screaming, and this CBD THC stopped that, which was a major relief for everyone that lived on the floor as well. And other patients stopped their frequent vomiting. And 2 of them stopped all of their morphine, and another one decreased it very much. And which also got rid of the constipation that they had. And so I actually really think this is a great paper because when you look at 10 patients, you get a lot more details about what helped that person, instead of giant studies that just give you a couple of highlights of the data that they looked at. And look at the levels that they were using here. 9 milligrams of THC, 18 milligrams of CBD. That is not a large amount. I mean, 9 milligrams is enough to get high for sure. And at that level, you want to be careful with someone who is not used to those kind of states. But as far as milligrams for CBD, that's not that many. People are often giving 100 to 200, 300 a day. So this small amount helped. Then you have this one, which was more THC focused. And this was 50 people with dementia who were experiencing aggression and agitation, and almost 80% of them reported improvements in their neuropsychiatric symptoms. And notably, there were very few adverse reactions as well. And something that you often hear, a significant number of patients achieve reductions or discontinuation of their antipsychotic medications. And, that's a really big deal. Antipsychotic medications are really hard on people. They really can whack you out with the side effects. And so often you see about the cannabinoids lowering the other medications being used of all these different classes. It's always wild to see. This one was interesting to me because it also helped with weight loss. Not only in these does the 12 weeks of THC and CBD in these patients reduce their agitation and their apathy and their irritability and their sleep disturbances. and their cognitive impairments and their aggression, it also helped with their eating disturbances. And it's well known that THC gives people the munchies. You can harness that and people will eat more, which is a good thing, depending on the situation. And for this last study, I wouldn't include this because it's a really good, well-designed study. This was a double-blind trial of CBD alone for Alzheimer's disease, so just CBD. And of the 15 patients in it, 8 got CBD at 200 milligrams per day, and the other 7 got a placebo. So you had a good placebo control for this one. And the people getting the CBD scored better on all of their scores, including hallucinations, anxiety, agitation, apathy, irritability, and caregiver distress. The only one where they saw some increase was some people did have more delusions. And when you're working with something as complex as this, sometimes it increases people's symptoms. And it's something I'll talk about more at the end when I talk about the specific tools that we use. But you see the same thing in the studies of high levels of CBD for kids with epilepsy. For some people, there are non-responders. There's always at least a third who are non-responders, or it makes things a little bit worse. Or there are people who quit because of the GI upset, tends to be diarrhea if you're taking lots of CBD, somnolence and sleepiness, or it can increase certain liver enzymes. So those with CBD, those 3 tend to be the symptoms that will make people stop doing it. Dizziness can happen as well. That's not as common, but usually you're talking about gut upset, sleepiness, and the liver enzymes. But yeah, this is just a quick smattering. But last year we had 6 good clinical studies that came out in just 1 year, and that's been true for a couple of years now. There's a lot of data coming out about Alzheimer's, and just to mention one more thing is terpenes. We don't have human studies on terpenes that I'm aware of, but you do see a lot of it in the preclinical literature. And I think we have an expert here on beta-caryophyllene, I believe, as well, Dr. Philip Blair. There's a lot of evidence that full plant extracts tend to work better. And I think partially that's because of those microdoses of terpenes. And, beta-caryophyllene specifically is perhaps you could argue is the most interesting terpene because it is the only terpene that also activates a CB2 receptor. And so it is both a terpene and a cannabinoid, which is pretty neat. And so there's probably more study on beta-caryophyllene than for any of the other major terpenes that tend to be inside cannabis. So not that I think you should be giving people isolated terpenes unless you really know what you're doing, but to give them full plant extracts is a great way to give them those microdoses of terpenes. So let's go on to Parkinson's disease. So this one is actually the reason I got into this field in general. I wish I had known more about this when my grandmother was passing from Parkinson's, and I would have pushed more because it can help a lot. It can help a lot. And yeah, so now I want to, cannabis for old people is what got me into this, and for kids with autism. And that was another big change in my life. It changed a kid's life. So the CB1 receptor in Parkinson's disease can help with glutamate signaling. Glutamate's the brain's primary excitatory neurotransmitter. So basically for neurons saying, yes, pass on your signal, that's glutamate. And that tends to get impaired in Parkinson's disease. But also it helps with dopamine signaling. And that's generally the neurotransmitter people think about with Parkinson's disease, is that the dopamine signals are not getting through. And the endocannabinoid system is very much tied up with both those, but especially dopamine, because not only do the cannabinoids tend to activate the D2 dopamine receptor, also, this is a cool fact, the cannabinoid receptors can form a complex with the cannabinoid receptors. It's called a hetero complex. And so you have dopamine receptors tied up to cannabinoid receptors floating around there on the lipid membrane, and they do different things when they are tied up together than they do when they are apart. And so it speaks to how much they are involved. And the other thing that the CB1 receptor does is it tends to lower overactive firing in the brain. So excitotoxicity, something that happens in epilepsy all the time, the brain is firing too much. That also can happen in Parkinson's disease. And one of the most known things of these phytocannabinoids is lowering excitotoxicity, the brain not wearing itself out with that. And also the CB2 receptor just helps with the immune system and all the changes that are happening because of the Parkinson's disease as well, and lowers the neuroinflammation. And it's one of the most shown things about the cannabinoids is a lower brain inflammation in general. It seems to do that via both receptors, but especially CB2. And one thing to know about CB2 is for a long time they thought there was no CB2 receptors in the brain, but now we do know they're there. They just tend to be at low levels until the brain is under attack, until there's some kind of problem with the brain. And so then the CB2 receptor levels. Is someone drawing on my screen? Can you see that? No, I guess you can't see it. That's on my screen. Yeah, but the CB2 receptors lowering neuroinflammation is a big part of how they do what they do. And so here's another great chart of the different areas that you have endocannabinoid system in the brain and the different things that you'd be helping with in Parkinson's disease, with your muscle activity, your motor activity, sleep, emotion. All of these things get dysregulated in Parkinson's disease because you simply have less dopamine to be. And dopamine helps not only with making decisions for your body to move, but also for you to make decisions about the world. And I actually have I have a good article about dopamine on Project CBD, if you want to read about how the endocannabinoid system interacts with dopamine. In my neural ocean metaphor that underlies my cannabinoid graphic novels based on Moby Dick, the endocannabinoids like anandamide and 2-AG are whales, but that would mean that dopamine is a shark. And it turns out that in this metaphor, you have these whales helping these dopamine sharks to work better in the brain, and that's where you're getting your help from. And so again, there's a lot of good studies on this too. This is medical cannabis for Parkinson's disease. This was 69 patients, and they were allowed to pick what worked best for them. Most people ended up with a 1-to-1 THC to CBD tincture. I'd say for most people, an oral oil is the best way to get some kind of oral thing, because it takes a little bit longer to work, but then it lasts a lot longer. And 1-to-ones tend to work well for people. I would throw extra CBD in because there usually isn't much of a downside to it, but it's always good to have CBD when you're giving THC to older people, because the anti-anxiety effects of CBD, as well as how it binds to the CB1 receptor, it binds allosterically, so it makes it less receptive to regular binding, which means that you get less high from THC when you have some CBD in your system. So if you're giving someone THC, always be giving them some CBD. And that's something that Dr. Mashulam was very big on. And so when they got these tinctures and were taking the amounts that worked for them, it lowered their cramping and their dystonia. It lowered their pain and spasticity. It helped with their lack of appetite, and it helped with the dyskinesia and the tremors that happen. And so a lot of them stopped their opioid usage as well. And I think one of the most important things that I've heard about more from clinicians and seeing research about is that when you're taking levodopa, the common treatment for Parkinson's is just giving people more dopamine. But there's a sweet spot of that, because you give someone too much dopamine, they get too activated and they start behaving wildly and acting in really addictive ways, whichever they might start shopping or sex or whatever. And it's not good. And too much dopamine also leads to the tremors as well, which is a really annoying part of the disease, frustrating. And so one thing that the cannabinoids help with is they help to widen that levodopa window. And so you're always looking for the sweet spot of levodopa. Generally with cannabinoids, you can be using less levodopa, and eventually the levodopa will stop working as well and be less helpful. And this will help extend the window that it works and widen the window that it works. And that's one of the big reasons people are giving it. Also, I really like surveys. I think surveys are a really important part of the scientific literature. I know they get poo-pooed by certain scientism type people, but when you talk to patients who have tried a lot of different things, that's who I'm going to believe. They're telling you this is what worked for me. So there's a bunch of surveys from the Michael J. Fox Foundation. This is not one of them. This was a survey of 59 Parkinson's patients, and they said that the cannabis in general helped with their motor function, their sleep, and their pain. And so they also talked about helping with the dyskinesia of the levodopa as well. So those are the big three I hear the most for Parkinson's: motor function, sleep, and pain. Then this one is a combination of CBD and THC. This one I brought in just because it had a negative that I think is worth noting, and it's about the detrimental effects on cognition and perhaps memory. And it is something to keep in mind. You know, THC, when you're taking THC, your memory will be less sharp. If you get stoned and watch a movie, you will remember less about that movie. And taking it chronically every day probably will lead to somewhat loss of memory, depending on how people are. And it is a negative that we need to keep in mind about this. You can balance about how much you're giving to people. And like I said, a lot of CBD can help to tamper down those negative cognition effects. But it's something you want to be paying attention to and warn people that it could happen to them. And then just to talk about one other drug, Nabalone. This is also sold under the brand name Sesamet. It is a synthetic cousin to THC, so it's not quite THC's exact structure, but it's very close to it, and it seems to work pretty close to THC, and it activates both the CB1 and CB2 receptor, and you can usually take just a couple of milligrams per day. I include it because there's a good bit of studies on it, and if you're either in a place where the person doesn't want to risk taking regular THC or CBD, or they're the kind of person who are only going to take a regular pharmaceutical drug, here is a cannabinoid that is a regular pharmaceutical drug. And so, same for Alzheimer's. This drug has a good bit of study on. So even for cannabinoid resistant doctors that your person might be working with, if it's a family member, Nabalone would be something that they might be more open to. But it is less tolerable. I just saw a trial last week of people with obesity who were using Nabalone, and it resulted. A lot of them quit the study because of more of those negatives of gut upset and feeling too high and stuff like that. You know, it's an unnatural cannabinoid and just doesn't quite work in our system as well. That being said, it can work, and for some people, the side effects are worth it. So just want to keep that in mind. The last thing I want to mention about Parkinson's disease is this one. This is actually an article I wrote 2016. I wrote 9 years ago. Wow. So there's something called REM, sleep behavior disorder, that comes with Parkinson's, and it is rather terrible, or it can be, because what happens is the brain's ability to shut your body down while you're in REM dream state deteriorates. And so whatever is happening in your dream, you can start acting out. And so if you're having a violent dream, which can often tend to be happening more when you're going through Parkinson's anyway, you can start acting that dream out. And so there's lots of spouses who are waking up to getting abused and hurt by their partners, and have trouble even waking them up out of this waking nightmare. It's something that happens a good bit to Parkinson's patients, and there isn't much you can do about it besides, dope the hell out of them in a pretty unpleasant way. And so I interviewed this great activist, Helen Garvey, and she found out that cannabis worked for her husband's RBD. And then she did a small scientific, like, citizen science study to share that data out there, and that helped get that out there more in the world and have more studies about it and get it more known. So my little contribution was interviewing her, and so you can read this article, and even though it's 9 years old, all the facts are still true. So yeah, cannabinoids for Parkinson's, if you know anybody, you really need to tell them about this. I wish I had. And then the last one, multiple sclerosis. This one is close to my heart just because it's amazing. It's so clear why it would be amazing, because multiple sclerosis is two different bubbles. It is a neurodegenerative disease. It's also an autoimmune disorder because it's the body attacking the brain's myelin sheaths, the fatty sheaths around the neurons that allow electricity to flow. The brain is attacking those. And so you have a Venn diagram of neurodegeneration and autoimmune disorder, and cannabinoids are amazing for both those things. So MS sits in the center of that Venn diagram of autoimmune and neurodegeneration, and so that's why you have so much evidence, so much anecdotal evidence, so many people saying this changed everything. The wife of our mechanic back home was an old family friend. She was living with MS for years. She finally tried a moderate amount of CBD, and she ran up the stairs for the first time in years and was just playfully poking with her husband. He was just so confused by it because she was so different and things felt so much better. Of course, I mean, the MS still progresses. It probably progresses slower, but this is a way to buy a lot more time and have a lot more pleasant life during the course of MS. And so this is a quick background about how it's helping. The CB2 for the neuroinflammation, the CB2 receptors are helping via the microglia and the macrophages, also via the immune cells, and also they help maintain the blood-brain barrier, which is something that tends to degrade in multiple sclerosis as well. There's also very strong neuroprotective effects. So for preserving those myelin sheaths and as well as the survival of neurons themselves, the cannabinoids are helping with that. And they also are helping to with the remyelination by the oligodendrocytes. Those are the neural cells that are in charge of adding more myelin sheaths to the neurons. And so via those, both the CB1 and the CB2 receptors help that to work better and to keep those sheaths and to keep them maintained. So here is our first study is about vaporized cannabis for MS. And in this study, vaping cannabis helped with the muscle spasticity, helped with bladder function, which is a big problem for MS, and it helped slow down the disability progression rate. And so I wanted to throw one in about vapes because basically vapes are the wonder drug for acute application of cannabinoids. So for pain, for spasticity, if you have something that you want to improve right now because it just flared up, a vape is a way to get that into your system. And in 2 minutes, you have as much, and you're going to be completely peaked on it and know how high you're going to get and probably how much relief you're starting to get. And so I would always recommend having a chronic oral dose that you're taking every day as your background protection. Then people find the vapes that work for them. Maybe even different ratios of vapes. One that's very strong in THC, one that is a lot more CBD and a little bit of THC. And to have those around the house for when you have a flare up, finding out which kind of vape works for you to help with that flare up. And so, yeah, they're just vapes are an amazing medicine for getting into people, and they don't have to be smoking something. I know in the hospitals of Israel, like at Ein Kerem, they have standard in the cancer units, there are volcano vaporizers with cannabis in them. And I think it's how the world should be going. That if you have a bunch of pain, just be able to suck as much cannabis as you want. And luckily, if you're scared about getting high, take a tiny puff, wait 3 minutes, take a tiny puff and keep going. And you'll eventually find the sweet spot between not being too high, but getting the pain relief or the symptom relief that you're looking for. Then there is Sativex. This is the other option for people who want to go with only medicinal and pharmaceutical. So the class of drugs is called nabiximols, but generally everybody thinks about Sativex from the company GW, which has now since been bought. But these are, even though they're pharmaceutical, they are made from plants, and they're simply a almost one-to-one of CBD to THC sprays. And there's been a ton of studies on them because they have a pharmaceutical company who needed to get them approved for epilepsy and then try to expand their applications to make more money. But they really do work. They are more likely to be covered by insurance. They're studied for the MS the most. I would say they'd be useful for any of these diseases we're talking about. But the GW has been trying to push the MS thing because that's where they see the most efficacy and the biggest market share probably. But it's because it works. So this was a 12-week multi-center observational study, and the patients worked with their physicians to find the best dosage. And that averaged out to 6 sprays per day. So that's about 15 milligrams of each cannabinoid. That's not much. Like I said, 50 milligrams of THC, 15 milligrams of CBD. That's the bottom end of what I would be starting people on. If that doesn't provide enough relief, you can go a lot higher. Basically your limit with how much THC you can give to someone is how high they're going to get and what they are comfortable getting. And tolerance starts to build to those effects. If you take couple weeks to keep giving someone more THC, they're going to be getting a lot less high from it after a couple weeks anyway. So with this Sativex, people saw decreased spasticity scores, improved ratings for pain, gait, which is a great thing, which is a really important one to study in this, urinary symptoms, as well as high overall treatment satisfaction scores. People liked it, and of the people wanted to continue using it, 93% of the people in the study wanted to continue using it. And so there was another similar study that came out at the same time, and in that study, the majority of patients reduced or eliminated at least one of their other anti-spasticity medications. And a few of them had their sleep problems completely resolve as well. And so I know I'm getting close to the end of my time, but I will say one thing about sleep. Sleep is going to be your trickiest thing because I I barely even want to write about sleep sometimes because it's so different for everybody. In general, a lot of CBD is actually awakening to people. But the main reason, always in the top 3 reasons people are taking CBD-rich hemp extracts is because it helps with their sleep. And so that doesn't make any sense, except maybe CBD does something different at lower levels than it does at higher levels. Also, a full spectrum hemp extract has microdoses of THC, and that might be what's knocking people out. But in general, with cannabinoids and sleep, I would say a third of people, it helps them sleep. Another third of people, it keeps them awake, like me. I do not go to the basement after 8:30 at night because it will keep me up. I'm in that camp. But my wife can take some right before bed, and that's going to help her sleep. And the last third aren't going to be affected by it. So when you're dealing with people, you have to figure out the sleep schedules that work best with their cannabinoid intake. And that's going to be very personal. It's going to be different for everybody. But as you can see, this is a very personal, treatments for this kind of stuff. You really have to be working with people and finding what works for them. This is a more practical study about the people who are using MS and the ways that they're using it. And so this talked to 250 people about it. And the main reason they wanted to use cannabinoids were for pain management. That's the number one thing. And generally they would be using an oil or a tincture. And the second most common thing would be vapes. And the third most common thing would be edibles. And edibles can, they can be a great ingestion method. They might take 2 hours to hit, but then once they do, you have a couple hours of symptom relief from them. And, for older people, a little bit of sugar can, a little bit of a fun edible can be a nice way to start the day. Half a gummy can make a big difference. And something to say about cost effectiveness, because a lot of times people don't want to pay for this stuff. And it's, you don't have insurance coverage in most places. But this was in a nursing home in Belgium, and with their MS patients, they found a clear cost benefit to giving them Sativex, especially for the gains they got in spasticity. They would spend about $6,000 a year on the Sativex and the care around it, and they would get about a quality adjusted life year gain of about 0.4 for the spasticity and stuff. So, if you are a hospital administrator, there are some good cost analysis studies about why it makes sense to be giving cannabinoids. And then this is actually my very favorite one because this was the first one. This is the first evidence I've ever found about this, but it goes all the way back to 1997. This was a survey of MS patients, and I will quote from it. And this is how long ago now? 30 years ago, 20 years ago. Yeah. So this is, it's so sad that this isn't more widespreadly known because there's been good evidence of people saying this helps them. And to quote from the paper, it says, the subjects reported cannabis improved in descending order, spasticity, chronic pain of the extremities, tremor, emotional dysregulation, anorexia, fatigue, double vision, sexual dysfunction, which is also something that comes up in MS a good bit, and you often hear about help from cannabinoids, bowel and bladder dysfunctions, vision dimness, and then dysfunctions of walking and balance, as well as memory loss. And so 20 years ago, you had all these people saying that it helped for that. Okay, and now the last two slide pages. This one is about, if you took all the clinical evidence that you'll find on those pages on cvresearch.info, here's kind of the basics of what they would tell you about dosing for these different diseases. Again, feel free to email me at pelger@gmail.com so I can send this to you. But in Alzheimer's, a nabiximols sprays of like 10 milligrams a day is what people are using. But there were some studies with oils where they're giving them 20 milligrams of THC and then 500 milligrams of CBD. And I think that is worth trying for people. It's the consumer level. And I think a way to do it is give people hemp extracts that give them minor amounts of THC and some CBD, and then you can give them CBD isolate on top of it. If you want to, CBD isolate is cheap and easy to make. You generally don't have to worry about the quality that much. If it tests clean, it's a very simple molecule, and there's so much of it across the world now. The prices have really dropped. So if you were buying full spectrum hemp extracts to get 500 milligrams of CBD, it would be, cost prohibitive for pretty much everybody. But if you bought just CBD isolate and you added that on top of regular doses of hemp extracts, that could be a reasonable way to do it. And maybe you get your insurance company to pay for the dronabinol or the nabilone. I don't think I mentioned dronabinol. That is basically synthetic THC. That is exactly like THC, except it's made in a lab, and generally people don't like it. It is a horse kick of THC, and it often either you feel nothing at all, or you feel like you got kicked in the face by a horse and you're really, really high because there's no balance of those other cannabinoids in there. So dronabinol exists out there. It's also known as Marinol. But I wouldn't give that unless you had to. For Parkinson's disease, people are often giving 300 milligrams of CBD up to a gram of CBD. You know, if it's not upsetting their stomach or it gets the symptom relief or they don't mind an upset stomach, I mean, I think it's worth trying. When they were taking oral extracts or smoked, those tend to be the lower levels of THC. I think Parkinson's patients probably need they're not quite as helped by the higher levels of THC like the other two conditions. That's just a general rule of thumb from what I've been hearing. It's worth trying, but I think a lot of the help is with the CBD and the low doses of THC. And nabilone is also effective in that one. And for MS, again, people are generally, when you're using the Sativex sprays, it's just 20 milligrams of CBD and THC. And for the oral extracts, sometimes people are getting up to 25 milligrams of THC per day. And which is a lot. It's spread over the course of a day. That probably you would not have to get that psychoactive effects. But if someone's sensitive, that could really, it could be something. So, like I've said with THC, it's about balance. And there can be higher levels of dronabinol as well. For MS patients, higher levels of THC seem like they can be effective. And so let's talk about the last thing is the main adverse effects that you hear. I know I covered some of these, but if you went through all of those clinical studies, here are kind of the hottest words that you hear the most. For Alzheimer's disease, people feel the sedation and the dizziness. It seems like they might be more liable to the dizziness effects. And also the cognitive effects, of course, because you're already dealing with cognition problems. And then for Parkinson's disease, I think they may be more sensitive to some of the adverse effects, and there seems to be more of them. So some people get sleepier, which leads to people with Parkinson's often have decreased motor control when they're sleepy anyway. And also the cannabinoids can help decrease motor control in some people. I know, I don't play sports as well when I have THC in my system. So I can imagine if I had motor damage, it might make things worse. And so it's one that will probably be different for different people that you're dealing with. Dry mouth is a common annoyance. Headaches is an annoyance that comes up. I know when you're taking high levels of CBD, headaches can come up for those kids with treatment-resistant epilepsy. We're taking high levels of CBD, and again, concentration memory problems. And for MS, sometimes it can increase people's pain, and you do need to know that. Maybe it makes people focus on it more, because even though the cannabinoids interact with the opioid system, they're not traditional painkillers. You don't get addicted to them in the same kind of way. And I know the best description I heard of the painkilling properties of cannabinoids was from a rabbi in Jerusalem when I was interviewing Dr. Meshulam, and I just happened to meet him, and he's like, the cannabis is the only thing that makes my life livable because I have a really bad back and I was taking tons of opioids and I would just be doped out. It couldn't work. Couldn't be good for my family. The cannabinoids didn't really take the pain away, he said. They removed it to a distance, and it made me easier to just focus on other things and not worry about that. And I thought that was a fascinating description of how it works. And when you look at the biochemistry of it, that kind of makes sense. You get a distance to it. It's not the pain that goes away, but it does help your painkillers to work better in general. All the time you hear about lowered opioid dosages when you give people cannabinoids, but sometimes it increases people's pain. Sometimes a cannabinoid is going to increase symptoms. You just never know who that's going to be true for. And again, the dizziness, the GI tract upset, the dry mouth, and the fatigue are some other things to watch out for that one. So those are my general shares on this. About my rules of thumb from talking to people. So thank you for listening. And I know it was tried to do my half hour. I think it's about right. But if you have any questions, there's my email address. Those are the sites that have my info. And if you're into cannabinoid graphic novels about Moby Dick, these are online on Amazon, and they are selling like Moby Dick did in Melville's lifetime, which if anybody knows anything about Moby Dick, they knew it ruined the author's career, and he never sold any of them in his lifetime. So, it's good. You gotta have a white whale project, but they are good. I'm proud of them, and I'm gonna get back to work on them next couple months. So yeah, that's everything from here. And feel free to hit me up with questions, and I can look at the comments or um, and I was told to stop sharing my screen now, so I'll do that.
Thanks, Lex.
Hmm.
Great lecture. Chelsea's got her hands full. She's gonna help you through the questions in the chat.
Okay, great. Yeah, and
There
there's the
were
chat.
quite a
Okay,
few.
cool. I can. Okay, cool. Um,
Go ahead, Chelsea.
all
Sorry, I'm
right.
trying to start from the top and seeing which ones haven't really been touched because I know that we've had some people responding.
Okay, yeah, I can see them here now. Yeah, I can go through quick. Um, and so someone's diagnosed with ALS, and slowed disease progression and some motor function. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, and more minor cannabinoids should be talked. Okay, this is the great point. ALS is the other one I didn't cover just because I only had 30 minutes. Um, but yes, there is a doctor friend in my life, and he is living well past the, usually from diagnosis, it's about an average of 5 years to live after an ALS diagnosis. He's lived well past that. And then there was the famous activist Kathy Jordan in Florida, and she lived like 19 or 20 plus years after diagnosis. My doctor friend said for him, it was the cannabis and the yoga that extended his life. And for the Kathy Jordan, she said it was swimming and cannabis. And so it does slow disease progression in ALS big time, it seems like. And yes, I am focusing on THC and CBD because those are the only ones that have clinical data for. I haven't seen anything for any of the other ones. But there is preclinical for the varins, which are like THC varin is just a THC with a shorter tail, as well as the acids, THC acid and CBD acid. Those are not psychoactive, but they don't seem like they cross the blood-brain barrier, and they're also trickier to extract because if you heat them, they become THC and CBD. That's why all of these gas stations selling THC acid, all you do is heat it, then you have THC. But if you leave it in that acidic form, it does seem like there's a lot of help for the guts and balance there, and gut balance helps your brain balance, and it does seem like somehow it's helping the neuronal system, even though they don't seem like they go into the brain. If you go to whitewhalecreations.com, I have my cannabinoid glossary where I explain which kind of whale is each of the cannabinoids. And I also put pretty much all the data that's ever been done on each minor cannabinoid is in there. And it's almost all preclinical stuff in mice and rats. There's almost nothing in humans. But that's only because it hasn't been looked at. And so if you know someone who's smart about the minor cannabinoids, or you're a good researcher yourself, you can screw around with them and find something. There is the isolated cannabinoid company out of Hawaii, and they just sell straight cannabinoids. That's the one company I knew doing stuff like that. Um, do shakes change with Parkinson's and cannabis? Yeah, you can really the dyskinesia can be helped for sure. And Chelsea, maybe I should let you, Chelsea, if you have ones you think
Great.
I should. Okay.
You're doing great. I was gonna say,
Okay.
I'll just throw in
Um,
anything if you miss it.
okay. Preclinical research formulations to help dopamine levels without THC. Yeah, some people are going to hate THC, and you can do a lot without THC, and it can be really worth um, trying. And that's how I would always start. I would tell people start with lots of CBD, get people used to it. Then when you finally give them a couple milligrams of THC, they're going to have a warm, comfortable blanket so they won't get as high from the THC anyway. So, um, yeah, good. Did they try lower doses in these studies? Yeah, some people were taking lower dosages for sure. I mean, a lot of these for the double-blind placebo studies, they have to be this, and this, so they can compare their data. But a lot of the best studies, in my opinion, are observational studies, where it's just like, okay, we're gonna introduce this to our patients, and we're gonna find what works for them, and find each of them is gonna have their own sweet spot, and we'll find it, and we'll share the averages with you and what we learned about dosing methods and stuff like that. For a lot of this research that you see here, in a couple of, in 2 hours or so, you can read the abstracts of most of these studies and get a lot of the hints about what worked for those people. Um, I might be getting invaded by a 4-year-old here. Um, so, um, okay. Yeah, this looks good. Are there any ones that I'm missing here? Um, yeah, Sativex has terpenes in it. True. Could CHS patients use that for relief? Nabalone. Um, that's a good question. If people don't know CHS, that's cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. And it's terrible cyclical vomiting, usually from many years of heavy THC dosing, and we don't know why it happens. I did all the research for a giant article about it. I've read every piece of it that's ever come out. Then they spiked the article. The outlet went under just before I was going to submit the article. But I did look at everything, and the the problem with CHS is generally any use of cannabinoids is going to lead you back to vomiting again. And it's vomiting that once in a while it kills people. It's so intense, but it's even the thought of it, you can't stop vomiting. And the only thing that helps is hot showers. And you run out of hot water in your house. You know, and so there's a problem with it now being overdiagnosed. Someone comes in with, gut cancer or cyclical vomiting syndrome, which is similar, but not caused by cannabinoids. And people are like, oh, you smoke weed, it must be the weed. And that's not right. But also, not enough clinicians know that sometimes it can be the weed. And one of the things is these people often really want to, continue taking in cannabinoids because it helps their mental health. Hi, love. Yeah, come here. You can come here if you want. But yeah, in general, they're going to provoke more symptoms. Yeah, you're too short. It doesn't matter. Like, yeah, good. Good. Foreheads. All right, come here.
Hi everyone.
Oh, is there less? Oh, it's time for them to go. Okay. Yep.
Hi everyone.
That's life. Gotta do something until you die. Is there less REM when you use cannabis? Great point. There's absolutely less REM when you use cannabis. And it's a key thing to know about this is that you generally stop dreaming. I generally don't dream because I go to the basement, most nights. And so it's interesting because sometimes people are sleeping more, but they might be getting less restful sleep. And so it's one more where you have to play around with what actually helps the people feel more rested. Some people should only be taking their THC before noon, and others, it's exactly what they need right before bed. But in general, it's going to be lowering your REM sleep. The CBD seems to have less effect on the overall sleep architecture, but it does seem to change it too. Overall, though, CBD is an awakener, which is so weird. Can it help with restless legs in Parkinson's? Yes, probably. Sometimes. But restless legs are weird, and it didn't help my aunt at all, and we gave her a bunch. But it is certainly worth trying. As some people here said, we have a lot of smart people in this room, so I think a lot of your questions already got
I put a little bit about restless leg in the chat. We had an amazing speaker, Dr. Deborah Kimless. She's a wonderful physician who had restless leg, and she created a product. It's using a pharmaceutical grade metal process, and I didn't really get into what the metal process is, but it's called Kylo Relief, and she also uses magnesium and CBDA, and she explained exactly how it works, which receptors it attaches to, and what restless leg is. So I have that lecture, and it's one of our best, as well as yours, Lex. We're getting a lot of good comments about how helpful this lecture was. It's hard when the chat is so lively because I'm, reading the chat and doing lots of other things. So I usually listen to them a couple of times. I'm really looking forward to this. I like the emphasis that you did on the type of studies that our physicians want to hear, right? That our clinical people want to hear in Western medicine. They want to hear about double-blind placebo and clinical trials in people. They're not all that interested in the proof of concept that's been created, globally with tissue culture and mouse models. But, so using the clinical studies is quite a good defense. And as we know, the best offense is a good defense.
Good.
All right,
All right.
guys, I can share my screen and let Lex put his kids to bed. It's evening where he is.
Yeah. Okay, child.
And let's see.
We didn't do the stories yet.
Okay, it's late now. All right. Um,
One more quick quote. Let's see. I like to end on a quote, and this one is, what is it? Your truest friends are the ones who will stand by you in your darkest moments because they're willing to brave the shadows with you, and in your greatest moments too, because they are not afraid to let you shine. So be that kind of friend. Okay, good evening, Lex. Thank you
all right.
again.
Good evening to all of you. Feel free to reach
Yep.
out with questions and have a good rest of your day. Happy June 1st. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone who's in the daytime.
Like us in California, we got the whole day ahead of us.
We do.
And I did put his white whale email in the chat just in case anyone wanted that or to reach out or send us an email and I will give you his contact information.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, send us an email. I asked a couple of people in the chat if they wanted to participate, or, you know, we need a cardiologist here for sure based on the new cardiology information. So if you want to share on Cannabis Public School, come email us. We'll get you in. We're booking for September. And one of the more exciting things we're doing is taking August off to kind of regroup and keep getting that newsletter up to speed.
Recalculate.
Oh my God, Chelsea, thank you so much for co-hosting. That was fun. I appreciate it.
I know we'll work out the kinks the here and there. If I was gonna say if you're on your iPad again and you want me to take over on the computer, I got you.
Oh, okay.
I got you.
That would be amazing.
No worries.
All right, go have a great weekend, everyone. Rest of the weekend.
Take care,
Bye.
everybody. Bye.